In Renewables, we've got these really smart people who are very technical or product or coder or developer. They're purpose-driven and they really want to make a difference. But they're also sufficiently self-aware to know that they've got a window of opportunity that isn't going to be around forever. And that if they try and do everything DIY in terms of the positioning, the pitch, the mission, the ship might not come in and they need some help. Business development is the whole process of marketing and sales. Traditionally, there can be that view of sales battling marketing, two different warring factions. That needs to be a nonsense. It's a process. It's about taking a potential customer from knowing nothing about who you are or someone who's uncovered a challenge that they need fixing, all the way from that point to being your greatest fan and advocate and telling the world about how amazing you are.
You found yourself in the renewables sector, helping companies develop their business and marketing. What was that founded on? Hello and welcome back to CleanTalk, the podcast shining a spotlight on inspiring companies within the renewable sector and the people making them happen from the inside. I'm Luke. I run a video agency called Harmer Visuals. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Stuart Pringle from Make the Break. Make the Break is a business development and marketing agency based here in Bristol. Stu, thanks so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me everything I need to know about how you found yourself where you are today in your career.
So I graduated from St Andrews back in 2003, and I've been a keen skier all my life. So I'm from the north of Scotland. So I grew up in the Highlands, and my uncle ran the main ski hire shop in Aviemore, and so as a kid, my dad and I, so we used to spend a lot of time in the winters. After studying, I didn't want to join the real world quite yet, so I went to do a ski season in Chamonix in France. And that turned into a couple of years kind of out there. And it came to a point where I had to make some decisions in life about whether to sort of be that person out there or do something with a bit more substance. So I chose option B. Whether or not that was the right move, we will never know. And one of the companies that was out there, they operated sort of corporate travel and events in the Alps. So I applied for a sales job with them because I knew the setup. I'd been out there, knew what was going on, and I thought, and I don't really know where it came from, but I thought, yeah, I reckon I could get involved in selling those trips. And it was a lot of team building, away days, corporate events, winter, summer, quite high end, very tailored, and that was kind of where I started my sort of business development career, almost without sort of consciously realizing it. But what was quite interesting was because I loved the product so much, and I really cared about it, what I hadn't realized was that actually puts you in quite a strong position because that enthusiasm just kind of shines through and it
Infectious.
Yeah, absolutely. So without sounding big-headed, I think I was good at my job. And I did nearly 4 years with them, went up the ranks a little bit, and that was how kind of the business development career began. So that was the start, and then moved to back over to the UK, moved to Bristol. There's a bit of a natural ceiling, so we're in that market. It's great fun. It's super hard work. You don't get paid that well, and I began to realize that I wanted to go further. And I got in touch I saw a job opportunity with a digital agency. I didn't really know much about digital at that time. I played around with the travel company's website and we'd done some very basic sort of early noughties kind of online campaigns. And it was all kind of just learning by doing. So I applied for that, got that job. And then that was a huge step forward because that exposed me to a lot of online B2B marketing. So I went from really more of a sort of a passion project in a way to something that was much more serious. And I was actually in particular areas of e-commerce. I won't get into the geekery of it all because it was very geeky. And that was a huge learning curve for me, both in terms of understanding how business works, how B2B marketing and business development works, how sales works, power of data, events, relationship building. It was an absolute crash course in the whole thing. And then from there, I worked in successive agencies and publishers, um, kind of through that kind of mid-rank sort of salesperson up to sales and marketing director, took on teams of account managers, various different roles, and then went all the way up to the heady heights of chief revenue officer for a media group. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. Myself and the founder didn't quite see eye to eye. These things happen. And but before that time, while I was still working in the agencies, I got to know Carl at Empire Engineering, where we're sitting today. So Carl's wife and my wife are long-term friends. And Carl used to meet me for a beer and say, Stu, I'm an engineer. I've started a business. It's working. But this whole sales and marketing piece, this is really quite unknown to me. It's uncharted territory. I've never built a business before. Could you give me some help? I said, well, I've got a full-time job. He said, no, I'm not offering you a job. Could you just help on the side? I said, oh, I earned some extra cash. Great. So this was about probably 6-7 years ago now. And what started as a bit of moonlighting for, frankly, a bit of beer money and helping a friend, I realized that, oh, well, if Carl could benefit from this, maybe other people could as well. So I came to the conclusion that I really was interested in the renewable sector from the little window that Carl had given me at Empire, and that there were lots of businesses who could potentially need the help. Now, the reason I mentioned the skiing at the start is important because I want to come back to that, is as someone who grew up spending a lot of time in the Highlands on the hills, Scottish skiing is very marginal. Okay, so it's some years there's snow, some years there isn't.
Right.
Some days there's good skiing, some days there isn't. And in my 43 years I've been on this planet, there's a massive change in the Scottish skiing back in the day, even with taking the rose-tinted glasses of being a young lad off, and what it is now. Similarly, the height of the glacier when I was in Chamonix in 2003 compared to where it is in 2023, it's shocking, the amount of retreat. So, as someone who's kind of, you get finally sort of attuned to that sort of pattern of the environment and the weather and how it's evolved, even in the short time I've been on this planet. And it is a short time, Luke. I know you're younger than me, but I'm going to call it a short time. So suddenly the stars aligned because I was seeing something that was happening in renewables that was, in terms of decarbonization and the progress against that, which is something that's super important. And that I'd found that there were businesses like Carl's who were super, super ambitious, very technical, and for whom sales and marketing doesn't come natural. Frankly, a little bit scrappy because they're doing things a bit DIY, and they could do with some help. And even though I hadn't worked in renewables for years and years, I realized I could take my experience from working in other sectors and bring that in. That, in a very sort of as swift as I can, is how the last sort of 20 years has brought me to sitting here with Luke Harmer in the Empire Engineering office on a Thursday afternoon, shortly before running a renewables event this evening.
Let's plug that. Yeah, make sure to plug that.
I don't have to because we're sold out.
That's true. But we can celebrate the fact that it's sold out.
Absolutely.
I'm excited for that as well. Let's talk about business development and marketing in renewables. How much of your work is B2B and how much of it is B2C?
Let's start with some definitions. So I've described Bait the Break intentionally as a business development agency.
Okay.
For me, business development is the whole process of sales and marketing, or really actually we should say marketing and sales, because that's the order that they come in. Traditionally, there can be that view of sales battling marketing, two different warring factions. And that needs to be a nonsense, because it's a process. It's about taking a potential customer from knowing nothing about who you are,
yeah,
or someone who's uncovered a challenge that they need fixing, all the way from that point to being your greatest fan and advocate and telling the world about how amazing you are. And for me, that is a continual process. I think HubSpot describe it very well as demand generation and then lead generation. So it's creating the demand and then creating the leads. And for me, it's that continuous process. I've gone out to market with business development rather than leading on marketing because I think sometimes that can be seen as potentially a bit fluffy or a little bit unfocused, or can have certain connotations that it doesn't reflect the kind of wider view that the business that we've created at Make the Break is chasing after. Um, so that's why we call it business development. Large chunks of it are marketing, in terms of what we deliver for our clients. To answer your question, all B2B.
Okay.
So I have, apart from those very early days being some of the trips to the Alps being private parties, the last 20 plus years have all been in B2B. I wear my B2B badge with pride. I see it quite often, particularly in people early in their career who naturally swerve towards B2C because it's cool and it's sexy and it's, gym clothes and trainers and football and cool stuff. And I respect that massively. And do you know what? I couldn't do it. I wouldn't know where to start. It's just not my thing. But I find B2B marketing absolutely fascinating. And I'm a total geek. And if we had longer today, I could talk for hours about it. And I think it's really hard. There's real craft in terms of doing it well. I'm not saying I always do it well. I can sometimes get completely wrong-footed. This week, for example, I put one post out on LinkedIn that had been very carefully crafted, had a lot of thought behind it, and a lot of effort. 300 views. I put another one out that was myself mucking around with a couple of people on Slack with some generative AI images for fun. Put that out. It took less than 10 minutes to write, to proof, to check. And it's had 15,000 views and massive, like 42% click-through rate, including from the CEO of RWE. Like someone who I've never engaged with ever.
Wow.
So I'm supposed to be coming into this game with 20 years experience, and I got it wrong this week. The throwaway post, poof, and the one I spent loads of time on, we're going to have to re-edit it and try it again. It didn't take.
B2B is hard. Yeah.
B2B is hard. And I think there is a process though. There is a process. So we've developed a process at Make the Break that builds through sort of 5 phases of creating a strategy for our businesses. And those 5 stages are the same every time in terms of what we look at. So we start with the customer.
And 5 rings.
The 5
I
rings.
spent some time on your commercial overview PDF or like presentation.
Yeah, I got a Slack message that you downloaded it. I didn't treat you as a lead because I figured.
I thought you might get an update on that.
So yeah, the 5 steps. Now that doesn't make us in some way like a rigid business. The point is that there's process. If you don't understand who it is you're seeking to motivate, if you haven't got a picture of what your customer is doing, what they're struggling with, what their goals are, who's influencing them, and what in general what is motivating them to undertake their task, you're just throwing stuff at a wall and hoping it'll stick. So we have to start there. So with every business that we work with, that's where we start. If they've already got it, great. Let's move on. I'm not someone who likes to do work for the sake of it. But if we don't have that, we absolutely need that first, because that is the foundation stone of everything that happens next. So there is method, but the answers for every business I work with, even though from the outside they might look quite similar, they could be similar size, similar sector, similar service set, all got different goals, different ambitions, and different kind of positioning that we need to work through. So the detail is different every time, but the process largely is the same, and it's one that I developed with colleagues and mentors and former managers who we've refined it over the years. It's not something that's just sort of we pulled out of our heads suddenly, and we've got a lot of background in those 5 rings in that process. And actually, it was my former MD at one of the agencies I worked with, Mike Crook, who it was sort of he developed the beta version, and we grabbed it and ran with it. And so, if you hear this, we're still using that. We're still using that little method today.
Iterating your methodology. How did you spot signs that the process needed changing?
In the early days, and when I was employee agency side, the temptation would be to gloss, just go, yeah, that's good enough. Let's keep going and kind of hope for the best. And funnily enough, it didn't work. Campaigns weren't as sharp, the messaging didn't land, we didn't understand what good looked like, we couldn't create smart metrics. It wasn't, it just didn't have a sound bit of rigor and structure to it. Now that I'm a grumpy old man, I just say that's not good enough. And 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 actually, that's the right move because people are not paying myself and the team at Make the Break to nod and smile their heads and
No.
say yes. The whole point of bringing outside in is to point out where the gaps are and then to support fixing them, and
Yeah.
that's what we do. So um, it is really important to call it out. Absolutely. There's a balance to be struck for sure. I'm a great believer in speed. You cannot strive for perfection at all times because it will slow you down.
Mm.
So you have to make that judgment call between feeling that this is going to be good enough to get where you want to go next, and not spending too long on it that you never launch the campaign and you miss your shot.
Going from working internally, in the back in the Alps, the ski job, to now helping, as you said, outside in with companies.
Yep.
What's that transition like? What works? What doesn't work? How do you have to change the way that you approach people and build relationships?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's been a lot of steps in between. So we're talking, 2006, 7 to 2023. So there's been,
Yeah, it's been some time.
It's been some time. And there's been several jobs, worked in a number of agencies and businesses in between time. Do you know what? It is easier as a director of a business. One of the things that's completely blown my mind is that as soon as you run a business with a little bit of profile, people listen much more than when I was an employee. For example, I was sales and marketing director at a business called Practice Web, which is at the time and still is one of the preeminent marketing agencies in the accountancy space in the UK. So a completely different sector to renewables. And business had really, really experienced people doing it, really absolutely spot on team. But because we were employees of an agency and we were young,
Yep.
we were often younger than our customer base, and they didn't always listen.
Sure.
It was that was a challenge, and we had to kind of prove our gravitas at times. Not always, but sometimes it was part of the unlocking the challenge was them taking us seriously. Whereas now I get asked more often, I then get asked to advise on things in which I don't have the expertise, and I have to say that's not me. I can't give you a view on that because I'm not a product person, or I don't have the experience of that size of an organization.
Yep.
Whether it's strategy or whatever it is. So that's been a bit of an eye opener. I don't know what that's called, but it's been a really interesting journey where there's definitely been a bit of a change in how you're perceived. I mean, you've run a business from quite early on, so maybe you've had a similar experience. I don't know.
The age thing's a challenge. I'm helped by the fact that, like you, I'm doing something technical and somewhat modern. Videos are often used on social media, and so people feel a little bit more comfortable handing over that domain to someone that's younger than them a lot of the time.
Sure.
But I probably don't realize how much of a challenge age has been, because a lot of the time it won't be obvious. Whether or not a client has taken a job or not taken a job because of my age, maybe behind an email is harder to see than in person, and a lot of the time it is just over email or over the phone or over Zoom.
I'm starting to experience different now. You had a go at me for being not quite a millennial who still knew how to record TikToks, and you were like, "That's quite good for an old boy." I was like, "Oh, thanks, mate." So maybe I'm starting to see the other side of that journey. I'll let you know how it goes.
You found yourself in the renewables sector, helping companies in renewables develop their business and marketing. So, yeah, what was that founded on?
Are you familiar with the concept of Ikigai?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember the exact names of all the circles on the fly in this conversation. But my point here is this, that I did the early work with Carl at Empire Engineering as a side project. And it was an absolute light bulb moment on two fronts. On one was the Ikigai. So let's just go with it, that it's something along the lines of what you enjoy, what you're good at, what is valued in the market, what has purpose, what can drive your passions, all of those things. And for me, it all lines up. And then the second part was spotting the gap. And what I mean by that is in renewables, we've got these really smart people who are very technical or product or coder or developer, but they're really into what they're doing and they're purpose driven and they really want to make a difference. But they're also sufficiently self aware to know that they've got a window of opportunity that isn't going to be around forever. And that if they try and do everything DIY in terms of the positioning, the pitch, the mission, that their chance might not land, their ship might not come in. And they need some help. So for me, when I said there's two light bulbs went on, one was I was like, oh my goodness, like, as someone who's conscious of what's happening in the world and now got little kids, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my career helping accountants grow their customer base. Or with great respect, I did enjoy it at the time. I loved it. If anyone from that world hears this and knows me, I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was great. But it wasn't driving my passion.
Sure.
Whereas now I was kind of entering into a world where there was an alignment with things that I really do mean a lot to me. But there was also this like real gaping need that there were these technical people who didn't have the skill set that I kind of crafted over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So it was like, let's go. Here's the opportunity. So when you say, what's the make the break, vision, mission, values, our vision is to support the decarbonization and the energy transition for the next generations. Now, I'm not a technical person. I'm never going to invent the technology that's going to do that. But as a mission, absolutely, we can give all of these small businesses the best fighting chance of succeeding. So
Yeah.
so our mission is to help as many as we can do that into the best of our abilities. So our clients tend to be, as I used the word scrappy earlier, and I mean that in a kind way. Their marketing is scrappy. So typically they will come to us and they will have PowerPoints that they've homebrewed, and today's pitch deck is last week's pitch deck version 1.112, 1.113. And the website was built by their mate or their cousin or themselves, and it's one page and it hasn't been looked at since. And the branding's very, very basic because it was done on a shoestring at the time. And now they're in almost like going into second gear or third gear, where it's like we really need to sharpen up and present ourselves. Because I do a lot of work with businesses who are relatively small, but they want to sell, and some of them eventually be bought by those big three-letter utilities in this world. Your RWEs and your EDFs and all of those businesses. And if they present themselves as this super technical, geeky, product-focused, down in the weeds little company selling into you, big person over there, like they're not going to be taken seriously. They're not going to articulate the value proposition in a meaningful way, and they're not going to take the shot. So we help them take the shot. That's why we exist. And I'm building a team around me who can support in that. So my team have not got years and years of experience in renewables, but my team have got years and years experience of running effective B2B campaigns and building the strategy behind those B2B campaigns for businesses with limited budgets available. That's where we shoot our shot. So if a business is pre-product, pre-revenue, still in the beta phase, we're probably not right for them. I'm not a product marketeer. It's not my area of expertise. If a business has one or two customers or some test cases and is looking to build on that and gain market share, that's where we can play. If they are market dominant and they're changing to different markets or expanding into a different geo, we might not be the right piece for that. But it's that small business who's probably past startup, heading towards scale up. They've maybe had some funding or they've got some revenue coming in. That's where we are. We can be that. We can be that sort of outsourced business development. Again, that sales marketing piece. in that phase where pulling it all in-house would be a very expensive punt.
Yep.
Good sales marketing people are not cheap, and they don't always, it's quite an attritional hiring process. It's quite a difficult hire. So we offer an alternative where they can pass the baton to us. We can help them through that phase and then pass the baton back when they get a bit bigger and they might have more revenue or more funding or more base in which to make that informed choice. And we can help them choose the people as well. So that's where we play in the market. And it's a little bit of self-reflection here. I spend a lot of time advising businesses to go deep and go niche in their niche, niche within niche, go right down.
Yep.
And I've found that Make the Break has gained more traction once we found our niche. So that renewable supply chain, that stage, that size, those characteristics, it's a really, hopefully I can articulate that in a really clear way. And having the confidence to get into that niche, to say no to other things, because I've got a P&L, like after I've now got salaries to pay out every month, I've got a payroll, it's all happening.
Yeah.
To have the confidence to say no, because this is where we play and that isn't one of those things. It's not serving the wider mission.
Mm-hmm.
That's massively beneficial. It's what I advise my clients and it's what I'm seeing working in my own business. So that for us, I think Make the Break has, it's got bigger, it's generated more revenue, it's gained more customers, almost from the moment where we defined our niche and went for it. So that's been, and it's, it's very easy for me to say that to other people. It's always harder when it's your own business. It's like proofing your own work. It's so much more difficult.
Yeah.
But it's played out. It is playing out right now.
What does brand loyalty look like within that model of passing on the baton? You've got customers that your ideal use case, by the sound of it, is to get them to a point where they don't need you.
Correct.
What does brand loyalty look like for you and keeping ambassadorship among the people that you've worked with for the years following?
Yeah, it's super important. So you're absolutely right. It might sound a bit of a crazy business model, but yes, the end goal is to get the business to a point where it doesn't need us or it is big enough to take an alternative option. The good news is that usually can't be done in a couple of months. So, we're usually around for a while.
Yeah.
And that then means that loyalty is very important. So, you've done an interview with Dylan Kane at Two Blue Solar. So I worked with Dylan and Dan and Rachel for about 9 months and helped them get set up. They've now hired other people and taken the role in-house. But I get emails, referrals from their contacts, or I get people who say, hey, Stu, spoke with Dylan. He said, should have a chat with you. So that loyalty piece is super important. And equally, the team know, and they've done it. I'm at the end of a Slack board or an email. If they've got a quick question, even though we're not officially working together, then of course, absolutely happy to help. And that's something that has happened and that we do. So it's very important. Make the Break has not worked with hundreds of businesses in its first 4 years. It's probably worked in a meaningful way with about 15, I would say.
Yeah.
So the turnover of business is quite low. And some of the businesses that we're working with now have been introduced to us by other clients.
Mm-hmm.
Look, the referral channel, as I advise my own clients, is still one of the best to mine. Of course it is, naturally. The other thing that has helped generate clients who Make the Break in the sector is hosting the meetup that we're going to this evening.
Yeah.
Which I don't need to plug because it's sold out. Now that started as an idea on a Monday morning that I wanted to host a meetup, and I challenged myself that by Friday afternoon we'd have a venue, we'd launched it, and we'd have tickets up for grabs. And we did it. And that was last summer in Bristol, and about 50, 60 people turned up, and we had pizza and some beers and a boat. It lost money, it took time. But having that as part of the brand makeup, I actually think is hopefully been a smart move, because it positions yourself as part of the industry. It gets you to meet new people. It gives you a reason to contact people, which is different to just buy my stuff. And all those good things around it. And the format's evolved. We've now got speakers, we've got sponsors. It's growing nicely. I've had a couple of people approach me, say, do you want to turn this into a larger events business? And it's an attractive idea, but again, it detracts from the main mission of Make the Break. So I'm not on a mission to grow an events company. Foolish, perhaps. Who knows? Perhaps there's a £1 million company sitting there, in the brand. But it, at the moment, it is part of our marketing strategy to be a voice in the industry, and it seems to be working, and it's fun. So that's why we do it.
Let's talk founding and managing. What's been your experience of starting your own company? Because the services you're offering are essentially how to build your company. How have you embodied your own services within Make the Break and sort of demonstrated to yourself that they work?
There's a few bits there. In terms of founding a company, I was never one of those people who always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I don't like that word. I don't like being labeled that, because I don't think I've been successful enough, to be frank. The business started because I was no longer employed. I had a heavily pregnant wife and a young lad at nursery. And I just wasn't inspired by some of the jobs that were around. In the meantime, what we discussed earlier, I've been enjoying the work with Empire and some of the side hustle work, I guess, side hustle work that I've been doing. It was a product of need. We needed to do something. I wasn't sure. I'll be very honest with you. I wasn't sure when I launched if it was going to turn into the long-term piece.
Sure.
What I hadn't realized was how much, this is a real personal kind of reflection, was how much I was going to enjoy it. I thought I would be too risk averse, because I'd always been employed since forever. And actually, I enjoyed it much more than I expected and found it less scary than expected. It's easy to set up a limited. It's easy to get, work with an account, get an accountant. Number one, get an accountant. Don't muck around. Don't try and do the accounts yourself. So, there's definitely some sage advice which you can get anywhere on the web about what to do in early stage of business. And I followed up on that. But what I also found was quickly I had 4 or 5 customers. I was unlikely to get sacked 5 times in a month. No, I'm serious. Serious. So I felt safer. My dear old mum, who you've met through another project, she was so stressed. You go, your wife's pregnant and, you've got nursery fees. I was like, yeah, I do, but I'm unlikely to get sacked 5 times, in the course of a month. So for me, it was actually no less scary than being employed. We were super frugal. We sold our cars. We cut back on everything. We switched off as many non-essential spends for the first year. Built up 3 months runway in the bank, in the business bank, a little bit of cash ISA savings on top of that, to the point where right, well, if everything goes wrong, we've probably got 4, 5, 6 months at a push.
Yeah.
Before we're struggling to pay the mortgage. It's not going to be fun, but we'd be okay. And as soon as I got there, I was like, okay, right, this is now up and running. And that gave the confidence to then go out and prospect for new business and choose the right business and say no to opportunities that didn't quite align. So but it was less scary than I thought it was going to be. So that was the first part of your question. The second part that you asked was, how can you sort of prove that what you were going out to do would work? And for me, that was not a challenge, because we were building on work that I'd done in the marketing agencies I'd worked in. So rather than being part of an agency supplying an agency service, I was an independent providing my version of that service. So it wasn't like a huge step. It wasn't like I set up a business in an area that I knew nothing about. It's like, well, I've been doing this for a long time, but rather than you sending your invoice to that employer and I'm part of the delivery team or somewhere in the makeup there, it was like, well, send the invoice to me and
Sure.
I'm going to work through it. So no one's really questioned that. Like no one said, well, why should I trust you with your business, with my business development when you haven't grown and scaled, a massive business? Um, as 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 me, but I have helped grow and scale many businesses through my previous roles, and some of the roles that I had were in businesses that went through some tough times, and we had to turn around. We changed our products out, we changed our revenue mix, we worked hard to get through various crises over the years. So there's a lot of war stories, a lot of experience there that I can take in. So I guess that gave me belief that I could do it, and just gone out and got there. But it's not been alone. I mean, even when it was the only person officially on the books was me, I've always worked with freelancers, and I've been
Okay.
completely open
Hmm.
with my clients as to who else is involved, what they're doing, why them. Um, I used to always say that, when I was working in the agencies, I said, I'm surrounded by lots of creative people. I'm not creative. I'm not a designer. I'm not an illustrator, but I know the value of those skill sets, so I will bring them into campaigns.
Yeah.
So as the business has grown, we still work with a number of those roles. We're starting to pull things in house now. I've got employee, but there are still certain roles that, for the moment, until we get to a certain size, it's best to freelance. And I don't have any problem with that. The clients don't have a problem with that because they're getting access to really good expert niche skills, and then we can flip that out for another skill that we need the following month.
Yeah.
So as a model, it's relatively light on its feet. And I'm fortunate that because of the 20 years work in agency side, I've got a decent network. We can dip into good people.
What do you want to learn more about going forwards in your career?
As Make the Break becomes more embedded in the renewables sector, in that supply chain sector, become an absolute sponge for learning about because it's quite a complex ecosystem, to try and learn who the runners and riders are and how they all interact. I become very interested in that kind of macro political energy conversation. I do not claim to understand it all. I'm still learning. So that's something that there's a bit of a natural affinity, is of course from working with these businesses, to kind of come to. So that's one piece. We're still refining how we're helping our clients. It's not a fixed beast. The service has evolved over time. We're improving how we are helping create strategies for clients. I think we are starting to experiment at the other end with more channels, video content with your good self, for example. I don't think we are anywhere near the end of that journey. I'd like to learn a lot more about how we can use that to the advantage of our clients, and help generate the results that they need. I would like to learn more about the whole funding strategies. I end up working with a lot of businesses who are going through rounds of funding. And now I don't really have the chops to advise on that side of business, because I've never experienced it. I'm a business development person, I'm a sales and marketing person.
Mhm.
Um, but naturally becoming more into contact with that. I've also chosen to bootstrap Make the Break as a business. We're not taking any funding. I don't think we're an investable proposition because it's a small service business anyway. But yeah, there's definitely knowledge there that I'd like to gain in the next phase of career.
We're going to go to Quickfire Curiosity now, which
Go for
is a quick series of questions. What's your most unexpected learning from working in the renewable sector, and how has it shaped your view of the world on a more existential level?
That's a really hard question. My unexpected learning, particularly from exposure working with clients in the wind sector, is actually it's a really small world. So you've got these huge global push for projects, all these gigawatt targets that seem to go up and up and up. Okay, taken a little battering recently, but the general trend has been, go, 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 go. And it would make you think that there were, endless people involved in it, but actually it's quite a small world, and it's quite a close-knit community. And getting to know them is an ongoing process, and takes time. So that's definitely been an eye opener.
Would you consider yourself a futurist?
I know you were going to ask this question, because I spoke with Mark earlier today, who you interviewed, and I'm going to answer the same way he did. Give me the definition first.
And I will give you the same response to the past two guests, which is I would like you to define it.
My understanding is futurist is someone who is looking for the trends and picking them out and understanding kind of what's coming up next. Does that sound about right?
What image does futurism conjure up for you? And do you feel like you align with that?
Clearly, at the moment, AI. Everyone's battering on about it, right? This, that, and that, and we got this endless wave of Chat GPT LinkedIn posts for about 6 months, and it got really boring. It's a really tricky one because in marketing, there's always the next hot thing. So whether it's Web3, whether it's NFTs, whether it's blockchain, whether it's AI, there's always something. And the tricky thing is that quite often there's an element of that that's going to become mainstream. But not every bit is. For every successful innovation, there's the danger that you end up going all in on Clubhouse, and then like a year later, like no one's on Clubhouse. Or you come off X and you go to Mastodon, and then you find that no one's over there. But equally, if you don't get your act together and use, for example, we've been using generative AI images in some social posts this week to great effect. I've used Bard to generate brand names for a project that now exists in the real world and to generate mock-up logos. It would have taken hours and cost loads of expense doing it the old ways. So there's this kind of tension between being on it enough to catch it, but also not spending loads of your time on something that then ends up being a complete cul-de-sac. It's a little bit of keep calm and not get carried away with whatever the current hype is. Like I got in a real barney with someone who will remain nameless about Web3 about a year ago. And I said, look, I'm not convinced. I'd like to find out more, but I'm not convinced. And they said, well, if you're a naysayer and a negative, like, don't want you around this conversation. And I was like, well, no, I just don't know enough yet. I'm not sure. Equally, I remember during COVID when, there was this huge Clubhouse. And I was like, I don't think it's going to stick. And I'm really glad I didn't, move communities over there or try things because it didn't stick. So it's super difficult. And I think it would be wrong to beat yourself up if you make the wrong call. You just got to pivot and move across when you realize you're in the wrong place. But yeah, you can't always get it right. I'm glad I didn't buy any expensive apes, JPEGs.
You said that you weren't particularly, or maybe like to the extent of you weren't particularly ambitious. How have what maybe you define as the ambition that you do have, how has it changed over time or grown?
Can I challenge you
Sure.
on that? It's not a lack of ambition.
Okay.
I just didn't want to be a business owner from a young age.
Okay. Yeah.
So I worked super hard to climb up the ladder in agency world. But what has changed is focus, confidence, I think. So focus, confidence, full stop. What I mean by that is going back to what I said earlier about Make the Break finding its niche. Like that level of focus has massively helped in terms of understanding what we need to do next with the business. And then the confidence piece is frankly just having been around for a while and realizing that everyone is winging it, right? Everyone is winging it. Everyone's having a swing, and that's okay. So, as someone once said to me, everyone gets up in the morning and takes some, we're all just, that's the thing. Doesn't matter who they are. They could be CEO of whatever. That's still what they do first.
Yeah, we're all human.
Yeah, exactly. So rule one is don't be
a
right. That's rule one. But also don't be scared of anyone. Absolutely not. And I don't know if it's come with age or, I've got 2 little kids. So I've got a whole other world going on of, trials and tribulations. Just haven't got time for mucking around. And it's definitely having that confidence, but being, fair and respectful and kind is super important. I think that's massively helped. And I don't know where that's come from. I don't know why that's kicked off. I don't know if it's because I got through year one of business and I thought, oh, maybe I'm not an idiot, or if it's just because I got older or I got more experience, or just stop. What's that phrase? You spend your 20s worrying about what other people think, and you spend your third. What was it? Spend your
20s worrying what people think of you, 30s not caring what they think of you, and 40s realizing they never cared about you anyway. Something to that extent.
Right. That's it. That's the one. It's true. It's just true. Surround yourself with people who are all pulling the same direction and want to support each other and get on with it. That's it. And I think it's definitely helped me because it then speaking in public, doing things like this, getting up on stage in front of hundreds of people, like I'm not got the fear that I would have had, in my early 20s. Like I would have absolutely myself. Because what's the worst that could happen? You muck up, so what?
If you could speak to your younger self, just starting out in his career, you spawn in at a ski resort, and you see yourself going down the hill, and he pulls up, and you've got 30 seconds before you come back to 2023 or 2024. What do you say to him to give him some advice?
I think there would have definitely been times earlier in my career where I would have said, "Stay there, don't leave. You got a good life over there. Like figure it out." I think I've just about got past that now. I worry less what other people think. Have a go. Put the effort in. Give it your shot. I know that sounds a bit prosaic, but I mean it. The worry less, definitely. I am a natural worrier. No one's watching. No one's listening. Just get on with it.
The final question.
Yep.
Is for those who don't really know what they want to do. They might have some idea that they want to work in renewables, but for all intents and purposes, they're somewhat unclear about where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
What questions would you encourage them to ask themselves to spot the best opportunities for them?
So I think there's two schools of thought here. There's the work to live and live to work. So are you going to do something where you do the work in order to have the life that you so desire? Or are you going to try and align so it never feels like a job, passion project piece? I don't know which of those is the right answer. All I know is that for me personally, I've gone down the work to live route. So, I've had responsibilities, family, all the usual trappings that people have. And when I was sort of in those early days of scratching around and trying to figure out what make the break should be, I pulled out the Venn diagram of, well, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? And what will people pay money for? And if you can find anything that sits in the middle of those three, that's worth exploring a bit further. And the other bit is if depending on, I don't know how old your average audience is, but like I was a complete idiot, and for a long time I just didn't know. And it's taken me. I sometimes kick myself. Oh, it's taken you this long to really sort of get going. Is what it is. There's nothing I can't change that. But it definitely, you don't feel the pressure that you have to have it all figured out in the early days. Like I say, everyone is winging it. Okay, promise you. Even those people who look like they've got it all together. So, don't worry if you haven't got it figured out today. It's okay.
Stu, thank you so much for your time on this show today. The humility in a lot of what you say and the authenticity is really refreshing, and just being open to the fact that some of it's in your control, some of it's out of your control, some of it you might have done differently, but ultimately you've got a piece about that, and that's really inspiring to see.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you very shortly in the next episode.